there, and welcome to this edition of What You Need to Know, a Canadian Polycast. I'm Alyson, a consultant here at Blue Sky Strategy Group, and as always, I have the pleasure of being joined by my colleagues, Brodie, Geoff Turner, and Cameron Holmstrom. Hello, guys.
Good morning, everyone.
Hello there.
So we finally have a date. There was a lot of talk about when the budget would be held, end of March, April. Cam, I think the last time we talked, you actually said it was going to be the beginning of April. So kudos to you on that. I want to start off with where you guys think the budget is going to go in terms of the focus for the government in this next fiscal year. Geoff, I'll start with you.
Sure. Listen, it's always a good opportunity on a podcast to use it as an opportunity to say you were wrong. In many cases, I was personally convinced that actually the budget would be delayed until the last week of April. I thought just between the convoy, which took up a bunch of the minister's time, Ukraine, where she quite rightly was the very lead on that effort with all of her background and experience there, and her role as Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. A lot of those are sanctioned business, goes through finance. And then the icing on the cake, of course, the NDP Liberal supply and confidence agreement that has some things that probably needed to be written into the budget pretty quick. And so I thought those three things were going to push them, but it ended up only being about 2 days from where we were originally expecting on April 5th. So here we go on April 7th. I think the other thing I'll say is that the big emissions reduction plan that was released earlier this week, itself, we weren't quite expecting, it was a mini budget in and of itself, 270 plus pages, something pretty material on almost every page, big dollars. Everything was in the 9-digit or 10-digit range. That was announced in that document. Neil's very surprised to hear that at this government.
Yeah.
But one of the things that we've been telling clients also just to keep in mind is that green document is just a report basically to Parliament, and so that to actually enact those things and fund them, they have to put them in the budget as well. So we'll be looking for sort of more details on that. That's especially important in areas like CCUS for many of our clients, and for infrastructure programs, clean energy generation, alternative fuels. There's a lot of different pieces of that emissions reduction plan that we're looking for more details for in the budget.
So Neil, as Geoff said, that the climate plan is probably going to be a big chunk of the budget. What else do you see standing out next week?
Well, I think there's, just based on current events, there's a space probably set aside in the budget, as Geoff alluded to, for defense spending. Minister Anita Anand has signaled that there will be some announcements in the budget about defense spending. Announcing defense spending and actually spending the money, of course, are two different things. A lot of money has been announced over many budgets for defense, and some of it gets spent, some of it doesn't. The other current event I would look to is this past week, one of the Blue Sky family was in Rome with Indigenous groups at the Vatican. And I think it would be against liberal branding to not highlight that in some form in the budget text, whether that's funding or whether that's new programs. What form it takes, I really don't know. But they never let a good current affair go to waste. And it's don't take that the wrong way. I think it's a worthwhile cause by all means, but it's timely, and that's part of what a budget is to.
I just want to stick with you on that. Do you, I think this is probably going into, covering budgets for as long as we have. This is probably going into a budget, the most current issues that we probably could have going into a budget. Like, we have Ukraine, we have First Nations, we have the environment. Like, there really sometimes hasn't, well, most of the time hasn't been this much
runaway inflation too.
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
we sure live in interesting times.
Exactly. Cam, so I'm on the First Nations. Do you agree with Neil on that? And also, well, Indigenous, sorry. And also, your party that you support has also going to have an effect on that. Where do you see the NDP coming into this budget? And do you think they were able to, with the supply agreement, get enough in before next week?
I believe so. And as we've heard, as the stories have come out about how this was all negotiated, how it came to be, these conversations have been going on for at least a couple months. So clearly, when those conversations were happening at such a high level, that was helping direct some of the budget conversation internally within what was being made. So when it comes to the actual agreement, obviously there are certain things that have specific timelines attached that must happen in 2022. Therefore, they must be in the budget. Parts around dental care, pharma care, child care. There are some targets of all of those in there. And then there are other things that were a little bit more loosely worded. And this is where I'll take off what Neil said about Indigenous peoples. There was a lot of commitment around reconciliation and housing and things like that. I would expect to see some of that in there. Ironically, I think this is going to be one of the least dramatic budgets we've seen in a very long time in a minority context, just for the fact that we're not going to be sitting there picking it apart saying, did they do enough? Did they not do enough? It's in writing. It's pretty cut and dry. And I'd be blown away if the government managed to go back on their word so quickly in the very first test of this confidence and supply agreement. I just don't see it happening. Mm-hmm. And when it comes to other kinds of spending within it, for the NDP, this is what they've accepted, right? We've accepted these conditions, knowing that other things may come in, like, for example, on the defense spending side and how that rolls out. So right. This is what they've agreed to. So it's going to be interesting to see the first road test of this to see where it goes. But what I'm expecting to see is that document really laying out the groundwork of that's the starting point. And then where else do they build on top of that? I think it's very interesting to see just how far they push that.
Geoff, where do you, and I'd like to go to each of you, but where do you, I mean, there's always something in a budget that is, wonderful eye candy for, any party that we just don't expect. Is there something particular that you think the Liberal government will put in there as a goodie for Canadians?
Wow, I mean, I spent so much time focusing on the things that we're trying to expect that I wasn't putting a lot of thought into what the shiny bauble would be. I think Neil makes an important point earlier about never let a popular issue or a present issue in the discourse go to waste. I think this budget. First of all, there's also like 10,000 things in the budget, so maybe rolling the dice a little bit about whether that little shiny bauble will catch attention. I think the in this budget to come, there's a lot of really serious issues on the table. Right. And we've touched on a lot of them. That's, like defense, reconciliation, housing. We didn't talk much about it. Cam alluded to. There's going to be a big push on housing. Cost of living, as Neil said, is definitely front of mind. Inflation driving a lot of that, but things like housing, things like childcare driving that too. So I don't know if there's a retail item here. If anything, it fits into the green agenda and it's things like home retrofits. But I think people are kind of expecting those now. So I don't know if it's a big surprise for, they're going to help you buy windows and new furnaces and stuff, and that's very welcome. But I don't think people are going to be like, oh my gosh, they're going to do that. They've never done that before. I think that's going to be some of the things. That's going to be some of the things that people get to actually put in the bank. Kind of out of this budget.
Neil, what is there a shiny bauble that you think the Liberals will dangle to pass the budget litmus test for the Conservatives?
Not really. They made the Liberals made it very clear, whatever that was, 2 weeks ago, that they were going to get into bed with the NDP and govern from the left for the next 3 years. So the Liberal, as a friend of mine said, the SPENDP Liberal coalition, they don't have to worry about putting any baubles in there for the Bloc or the Conservative Party. All they need to do is make sure that there's enough in there to allow Mr. Singh to support the budget. There's been vague words about pharmacare in previous budgets. I hope there's some more on that. The last budget, if I remember correctly, they had $500 million a year over 2 years for rare diseases to help offset the pharmacare costs of people who have exorbitant drug fees due to rare diseases. Hopefully there's some more bones around that in this budget, but there's absolutely no reason for them to put anything in there for the Conservatives. Hopefully there's something in there for Canadians who are having a hard time buying groceries and paying rent and heating their house nowadays. I think that would be the biggest bauble they could put in there.
I agree. Cam, so I love that the analogy that Cam gave, courtesy of his friend, about the NDP and the Liberals there. Do you expect this budget then to pass, because the Liberals and NDP have this agreement to pass very quickly within the House of Commons and come into effect.
I don't expect it to be held up. I don't know if it'll be passed super fast, but I don't expect it to be held up either. But what I would expect to see, and to me, this is the irony of the situation, is that when it comes to things that could be in the budget, I think you're kind of looking at other places for inspiration at this point. Ontario is about to go to an election, and then there's been talk that there will be an increase in the speculation tax in Ontario. Could that be something the federal government decides to come after when it comes to, again, housing affordability? I find it interesting for the conservative side, because some of these, again, you're basically talking about people basically voting against dental care. Doug Ford brought in a dental care program in the last 4 years. You think it'd be a natural thing to kind of come across the aisle on. But anyway, what I'm looking for, though, you're talking about potential interesting baubles. One, there has to be something on the affordability front. I know the NDP has been pushing lately on gas prices and things like that. You're not going to see the carbon tax removed, but could you see part of the HST removed? Could you see part of the excise tax removed? And let's be honest, it's one of those things that when you're talking about a taxation fairness piece, it's hard to justify to governments when you're saying we're going after the big guys, when every time the price of the global price of oil goes up, it brings them more money automatically just by the nature of the system that's created to collect those taxes. So that could be a place where you could do it and still not hurt your climate targets. The other one I'm looking at, though, you're talking about timely things. I'm looking at the 2026 World Cup. Canada just qualified for 2022. We're co-hosting 2026. Alberta has just announced this week that they are now going to put money towards getting part of the bid. Toronto will as well. There's going to be infrastructure, there's going to be support. What better time for the federal government to step up and say, you know what, we're going to put some money behind this and help maybe renovate stadiums or bring in practice fields or whatnot, infrastructure to support the game at a time when 1.6 million people watch Canada qualify for the World Cup on Sunday.
That's I like that, Cam.
A million people more than watch the Leafs on Saturday night. So I would point out that you're talking and trying to build the moment. Why not jump on that?
I'll just say Alberta is Canada's sports province, and I think investing in sports infrastructure in Alberta is a really good return on investment, especially from an economic diversification point of view. So
yeah, great. You know what? Never thought of it. I love it. I'm all for it. Go Canada, go in that area. And thank you guys. We'll see what happens next week, and I'll be sure to have each one of you back so we can hammer out what we like and what we didn't like about Budget 22. So Geoff, Neil, and Cam, thank you as always. And to you, the viewers, we look forward to having you join us next time. Thanks.
Have a good weekend, everyone.
Bye.
Blue Sky Strategy Group is one of Canada's leading public affairs firms. For government relations, lobbying, and strategic communications advice across Canada, visit us at blueskystrategygroup.com. Blue Sky Strategy Group is a proud member of the Global Communications Alliance.